Morning, folks. It's an absolutely stunning day here today. It's chilly, but it's absolutely glorious. There's Mr. Hayden and Miss Scotia. But it is an absolutely glorious day with the sun shining. As I say, it's a little bit chilly, but it is glorious. So I thought we'd pick up where I left off the other day. So my mum decides to leave my dad again and move. What are you barking at? Maybe think you're a guard dog, and you're not a guard dog, are you? You're silly. She used to career around this skate park when she was younger. Used to jump into the play park behind there, and you're just you, aren't you? You're just Scotia, really. Yeah, you are. Oh, and there's another one. No! Don't even think about it. Come on. Come on. Come on. Sorry. Yeah. Come on. Let's go this way. Come on. Let's go. Come on. Let's go. So yeah, my mum leaves my dad, and she used to get the magazine called The Lady, you know, where there were jobs going and with sort of Thai cottages, and my mum was a brilliant cook. That was something that was absolutely phenomenal. Her cooking was beautiful, her food was beautiful. So, you know, everything we went through as kids, we did get fed with really nice food. And as I say, I always remember there being, you know, biscuits and cakes in the biscuit tins. And, you know, I know my brothers used to nick the tins and my mum's knitting needles to pretend they were drums. But there was always, you know, cakes and sweets that she used to make. And, you know, you come home from school and you could always go to the biscuit tin and find something to eat. She never bought stuff. It was all homemade cakes and flapjacks and brownies. And she used to make a Christmas cake every year, and of course it was full of alcohol. It's a wonder we weren't pissed when we ate it, but we didn't used to eat it because she used to put so much marzipan on it. And, you know, I like marzipan, but very sickly. So she used to start making a Christmas cake at sort of, you know, in October or whenever it was, and keep adding alcohol and stuff to it, as you do. So anyway, she leaves my dad, and we moved into, there was an elderly gentleman that I think she saw the advert in The Lady, and he was actually living in the village that we were living in, well, not far. And so we were in this private rent, and so she ups and leaves with me, and we go to this elderly gentleman's house, and I think my mum was cooking and caring for him. And me and mum lived in this one bedroom upstairs, and we shared a double bed. And I can remember coming home from school and, you know, crouched over this electric fire to keep warm. And And I was a bit of a weird kid. I hated wearing dresses. And my mum had a photograph of me taken wearing a dress. And she said to me that as soon as the photo shoot was over, I was rip the dress off and, you know, put my jeans on or whatever. And I actually, I think I tried to destroy the dress. I ripped it, and I think my mum had to hold it together with safety pins when I next wore it. But I hated it. I can still see it now. It was a kind of pink and grey checkered material dress, and it was horrible. And I used to wear most of my brother's cast-offs. Jumpers, jeans, you know. The one thing I do remember is shoes. My mum used to actually take me to get my feet measured, you know, so that I had the right size shoes. And that happened until I was up sort of the age of 11, and then I can remember going to school in shoes where my feet were scrunched up because they were so small. And but she leaves my dad, and we go to this. Scosh, come here a minute. Come here. Here, do you want a treat? Here, you want a treat? Just I'm just grabbing hold of her a minute because there's a guy with a collie over there, and I don't want her to go legging it off up there, which is what she does sometimes when she's naughty. So just going to pop her on the lead a minute. So we go to this elderly gentleman's, and you know, we weren't there very long, probably a few months maybe. And my dad had obviously had to leave the home that we'd been living in because it was private rent, and I think obviously we fell behind with the rent and he got kicked out. And so anyway, my mum sees another advert in the Lady. Funny, we used to sit there trawling through these adverts, and she'd apply for them. And right, got you just for a minute on the lead. So we just put these in the poo bin, these bags. So we ended up moving to another village, to this lady's property. And this lady that we moved to had a bungalow. So my mum, the idea was that my mum would cook for this lady, and we had a 3-bedroom bungalow. And you know, the bungalow was nice. It was, you know, it had its own garden, and it was on private property up this woman's drive. Now this lady, my mum used to cook for. She was, you know, rich. She had she used to ring a little dinner bell when she wanted her dinner, and then my mum would go through and take her a dinner and serve her. And she had to cook. My mum had to cook for dinner parties and souffles and all that, jugged hair and And this woman, I actually ended up working for a few years later, because she had coursing greyhounds. And when we first moved there, obviously I had to then go back to the first primary school that I'd been to, because I was in a different village. But this lady had coursing greyhounds, so that was my first introduction to greyhounds. So we're living there, I changed schools again. And it's not long, you know, before my father moves in again with us. Because, as I say, my mum couldn't live without him, but she also couldn't live with him. So, I had a bedroom at the bottom of, sort of off the kitchen in this bungalow. And my brother obviously had his own bedroom, and he was away at school, but obviously he came back in the holidays. And my parents had their bedroom. And I could never sleep in my bedroom. I was absolutely terrified. And I used to spend night after night after night sitting on a chair outside my parents' bedroom door, just crying and screaming because I was so frightened. And it got to the point where, again, my parents had to move a bed into their room so that I could actually sleep in their bedroom. And my brother, when he used to come back from school, he used to be particularly nasty because he used to jump through the window in the middle of the night to scare me, and it was terrifying for me. And we had this attic in the bungalow. It was like a little attic thing, and my brother would shut me in the attic with all the spiders, and I used to scream and scream and scream and scream and scream. Absolutely scream. So we're living there. My father had returned, and you know, the violence was getting worse and worse and worse. It was shocking, really. It was just, and my fear levels were going through the roof. And we had a black cat. We had several black cats when I was growing up. And the funny thing is that we always called them Scatty. We had this black cat called Scatty Cat. And anyway, one day the cat went missing. And, you know, we'd searched high and low, and we thought, well, maybe it got run over on the road outside. And anyway, one evening my mum is serving, you know, supper or dinner to this lady that, you know, she was working for. And in comes a pack of Jack Russell Terriers, because she had a pack of terriers, apart from the coursing greyhounds that were down in the kennels in the garden. And actually our cat used to sit on top of the runs and drive the greyhounds nuts. And as you can imagine, you know, she'd sit there washing herself on top. And I used to say to her, you know, one wrong pour and you're gonna end up as food for the greyhounds, because you're gonna fall down the other side, and that'll be it. Anyway, this one evening, cat had been missing for a while, and Jack Russell Terriers come running into the living room with our cat that's obviously been dead for a while. I mean, you know, it was just dried up and just a carcass really with fur on it. And of course my mother, you know, screams and whatever. And the lady, I think she knew that the dogs had the cat, and I think she tried to hide the fact. And I think that particular evening the dogs just decided that they were gonna, you know, drag it out and bring it in. So that was the end of our cat, and that really affected me, because you know, I loved our animals. I loved my cat, and when that happened, it was was pretty devastating, really. And this lady that you know my mum was working for, she was very rich, but she used to make me laugh because she was very, very rich, very, very, you know, posh and pompous, but she used to love watching Coronation Street every night, and my mum could never understand it because she said, why does this woman want to watch Coronation Street every night? Anyway, this woman wouldn't miss it, you know. She was glued to the telly to watch Coronation Street while she was eating her supper, which was quite hilarious, I think. And as I say, I ended up working for this lady a few years later with the coursing greyhounds. But my brother used to come back from school, and he was, I think he was, you know, probably parts of him were quite psychopathic. I think he didn't seem to have much feeling, and as I say, he was always sort of trying to scare me, and I remember he eventually got given an air rifle, I think. I don't know whether mum or dad got him this air rifle, and he used to go off and shoot birds with it. You know, and he used to fire the gun in the garden, and as I say, you know, a few times he shot me, and so he was, you know, it was getting worse with him, it was getting worse with my mum and dad. I mean, when my mum would have my dad back, of course he'd make this promise of, oh, I'll give up drinking, I'll stop drinking, I won't do it anymore, and she'd say, oh, well, I'll do it with you, Frank, you know, we'll do it together, and it never lasted. I can remember my dad said, right, he'd only drink cider, you know, as if that wasn't bad enough, but he said, you know, he'd stop drinking the whiskey and he'd just drink the cider, and you know, just gonna let skirt off again. Here, done. So, but then you'd see him in the pub, you know, because we used to have to go to the pub with him, and you'd see him in the pub saying to the barman, winking, you know, and that was a sign to the barman to actually add a double whiskey to his cider, you know. So he wasn't stopping. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn back round and go back round this way, kids, back up. So he was, you know, he was a nightmare, absolute nightmare. And when my brother used to come back in the holidays, you know, he had his friends. He had friends that he'd been, you know, to school with, and friends from the village that we'd lived in when I was first born, and he was still friends with them, and you know, so I didn't kind of have him to hang about with as much. But when he used to go back to school, I used to be absolutely distraught, and I just used to go into his bedroom and play all his music, because he had all his, you know, music, his albums, his records, and I used to sit playing all his records, and used to spend all my time in his bedroom, because I desperately missed him. Although, you know, I didn't have, you know, a close relationship with him in any sense, but I desperately needed him, and you know, I so wanted him to love me, I guess. And you know, it's hard because to kind of convey the distress that I was feeling at the time, it's kind of impossible, because you know, it really, really was. It was horrendous, and So somewhere in this kind of timeline, Dad had obviously turned up again, and things were as violent as they could be and worse. And he used to lock my mother out of the house. It became far worse later on when we moved to the next property, but he used to lock her out of the house, and she'd be going, "Oh, Frank, let me in," you know. And she'd turn to me and she'd say, "Lucy, open the door," you know. And then my father would turn to me and say, "You let her in and I'll kill you." You know, so I was kind of there in the middle, as my mum saying, "Don't listen to him, do what I'm telling you, open the door, let me in." And I'd be standing there, and my dad would, you know, say, "You dare and I'll kill you." So things were getting a lot worse during this period of time. And I had to make notes again because it's quite difficult for me to keep track of what happened and when it happened. So where am I? Let's just start like this. And yeah, the one blessing that I had when I moved to this place was just round the corner, literally across the road round the corner, was a family whose daughter was the same age as me, and she had a couple of horses and lived in a nice house. And I think my mum and her mum, obviously, well, her mum knew the lady that my mum was working for, so me and her daughter got introduced, and she was amazing, and I still love her to this day. We actually met up with each other when I went back to England last year, and she, amazing girl. And I spent most of my time, I was still going to the riding stables, even though we'd moved again, and I was still riding and loving my riding, absolutely loving my riding. It was my only escape, really. And then when I met this wonderful girl, her family were fantastic. I mean, they used to take me on holiday with them. I used to stay over at her house. As I say, we were out with her horses, and her family were just amazing. And I can't ever, you know, thank them enough for what they did, you know. And I think they kind of knew that things were, you know, hard, tough for me at home, and as I say, I can remember one holiday to Devon, and it was just great. It was an escape from the crap that was going on at home, and I'm so thankful. I am so thankful for, you know, for those times and for that family. Right, shall we start walking back? Yeah, start walking back, because time for your breakfast soon, isn't it? And you know, it was a huge release to me to be able to you know, have somewhere where I could go where I wasn't, you know. But then there was a bit of me, and this again is what, you know, kids of alcoholics deal with. They deal with guilt, even though life is so horrendous at home. When you're away from it, you actually feel guilty, and you know, you actually want to go back into the awful situation because you can't kind of, you know, cope with being away from it. I suppose because it's what you're used to. But I mean, I can remember I can remember one instance where I went to stay with my eldest brother. I think, I used to go over to his. I think he tried to kind of get me out of the situation a little bit, which I'm thankful for. But I cried my eyes out. Absolutely cried and cried and cried, and I think he ended up having to take me back. That's kind of, even though it was crap. And as I say, when Pete used to go back to school, it was horrendous. I mean, the pain I used to feel, I used to just cry and cry and cry, and it was just, it was awful. Another good thing I remember is my dad used to love gardening. When we moved to the next house, we had a massive garden, and he used to grow all our vegetables. And, you never went to the shop and bought your veggies. It was all homegrown, and he loved his garden, and and it was great. And I had a little flower bed because I wanted to grow flowers. So my dad. There she goes. Just an early morning dig then. So my dad, is that better? So my dad, set aside a couple of little flower beds for me to grow seeds in. And, that, I really enjoyed that. I used to grow mustard and cress, and, and grow these little flowers. And I was absolutely desperate to have my own pony, and I think I spent years and years and years just following my mum around going, I want a pony. And of course, the answer was, we can't afford it, you can't have your own pony, we've got nowhere to keep it. We were we weren't in a position to have. I mean, my father had the money, don't get me wrong, as I say, he had a huge pension, but most of it went on drink. But we had an old chest of drawers, and I remember we had it out in the garden, and I used to pretend it was my pony, and I used to ride this chest of drawers in the garden, or sit on the wall. Will you stop? The dog's up there and you're down here, so just pack it in. Alright? Honestly. You're giving it what for this morning as well, aren't you? No! Come on. Come on! And I used to sit on this chest of drawers, pretend it was my pony. And as I say, I was still going in stables, and I just adored horses. They were my life, and I'd learnt to ride, and it was just great. It was my escape. And if I wasn't there, then I'd be round at my friends, staying over there, or they were tiny little positive things that helped me get through, I guess. And as I say, my brother would still be in touch with his friends that he had from when he was at school, and from the village we lived in, first of all, and the neighbours that he'd gone to stay with, or my mum had put him with when she'd gone into hospital to have me. There were two sons, sort of, one son was the same age as my brother. And right from when I was a little girl, actually, he'd given me this, got a photograph of it, he'd given me this little silver mouse brooch, and I used to wear it on my jumper, and you know, I don't ever remember anything untoward happening, but you know, he was around a lot in my life. My brother used to obviously you know, have him over, and he used to go off, I don't know, they used to go off and shoot together and do stuff that boys do, I guess. And he used to, I remember this one day, my brother obviously was home from school, and I guess mum and dad were out, I suppose. Mum was working, obviously. Dad was probably at the pub. And, you know, I can remember my brother used to call me into his bedroom, you know, while his friends were there, and sort of bully me a little bit and punch me in the arms, and just, you know, just doing stuff that he used to think was hilariously funny. And because obviously I wanted to spend time with him, you know, I used to let him just do it. Anyway, one particular day, I was in my parents' bedroom. And my brother's friend walked in to my parents' bedroom where I was, and I took it that my brother was actually in his bedroom next door. And this friend of my brother's pushed me down on the bed and pulled my jeans down and tried to rape me. And I have to backtrack on that word, actually, because YouTube might give me a strike for it. So he pushed me down on the bed, pulled my jeans down, and he tried to R-A-P-E rape me. And I remember, now bearing in mind I'm kind of 9 years old here, I knew nothing about sex. I'd never been taught about sex. You know, I didn't know any of that until I went to secondary school, really. So I guess I kind of didn't know what he was doing. And he was, you know, he wasn't unkind, he wasn't cruel, he wasn't violent. And but yeah, it obviously was not a nice experience, because bearing in mind he would have been about 14 and I was about 8 or 9. Obviously when he tried to, you know, to penetrate me, it was painful and it hurt, and I think he kind of backed off because he knew he was hurting me. And then, you know, it's all right, she's okay, don't worry. She won't go in the water, she hates it. Come on. So yes, as you can imagine, I don't even know how I felt. I kind of remember how I felt at the time, numb, and I didn't understand what was happening. But then later on, obviously, it suddenly hit me what had happened, and I never told a soul. I never told anybody. In fact, I told my mum when later on, many years later, after she'd stopped drinking and become a Christian, and that was when I told her, and of course she broke down in floods of tears and felt guilt and everything over what had happened, and as you can imagine, so didn't think anything more of this incident. And then the more my mum kept talking to me about the past, you know, later on, after she'd given up drinking, as I say, you know, we spent many hours talking about stuff, and I'm convinced, and she was convinced, that the family, obviously, that she'd sent Peter to stay with when she'd gone into hospital to have me were obviously there was abuse going on in their home, and she believes that my brother was sexually abused while he was there. And anyway, so obviously, the friend that did what he did to me, he'd had it done to him. Obviously, it was in the family, and come on. And when she used to sit and cry, Mum, and say that, when she picked Pete up from the neighbours, he was a totally different boy. He was so traumatised. And sorry, I get quite emotional about this. Not about me, but because of what happened to my brother. Because he didn't deserve that. He did, no kid deserves it, do they? But, he didn't deserve it. When she went to collect him, she said he'd started pooping his pants, wetting the bed, and was just traumatised. And the thing that made it worse for me was that when I started recalling and kind of thinking about my past and stuff, the thing that I couldn't grasp was that, or the thing that I couldn't get out of my head was that my brother had known about it. And I kind of grew up all these years thinking that, it was deliberate. He knew. He was in his bedroom and his friend came through, did what he did. And there's no way that my brother wouldn't have known about it. Now I have doubts because I don't know that he did or not. And if he did, then he may have suppressed that. And don't forget, my brother was severely emotionally traumatised. And I mean, nothing ever happened with my brothers in that respect. But there was no sexual abuse in my family. It didn't happen. It was emotional. It was violence. There was no. My father didn't abuse us in that way. My brothers didn't abuse me in that way. But I grew up with this awful feeling, that obviously my brother hated me because he'd known what had happened and he'd basically encouraged it and set it up, basically. Which, was very hard for me to deal with for a number of years because I found it extremely difficult to get my head around the fact. And I remember when I did bring it up many years later, my brother went ballistic, really ballistic. Basically said that if that had happened to me, then I deserved it, and whole nasty lot of stuff came out to do with it. But so that's kind of what happened. And I guess, obviously this it would have an effect on the child, wouldn't it? Good morning. I can't talk because I'm doing a video. So I can't stop the video. I'm doing a video. So it's all right. It's just my friend coming down the beach with his dogs.